Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's poppin', shaking, cracking, Fantasy Champs? It is Thursday, March 26th. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon continually on phone call until we're allowed to leave our houses.
Day 30. I'm running out of food, water, and supplies. But I still have my poster of Tom Brady in the Patriots uniform.
Oh, boy. I'm
sad still.
I was gonna say, I'm like, I don't know how to feel anymore. I'm good. I've been going through the stages of Tom Brady leaving grief,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm currently in anger.
I'm a full-on Buccaneers fan.
Okay,
I think.
Okay.
I'm rooting more for the Buccaneers than the Patriots.
I'm starting to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brady's one hell of a football player. We know that. Love Tom Brady. But he is soft.
No, I think that's just the anger in you talking.
Probably. We got a lot to get to in this episode. We're going to continue ranking the quarterbacks in part 2. So we're going to go through 7 through 12 in this episode. We'll start the show with a quick question. But before we do that, check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram and like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at the FF Champs, on Instagram at the Fantasy Champions, and at facebook.com/The Fantasy Champions. Subscribe wherever you listen: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and be sure to click the bell on YouTube for notifications. For some reason, I'm extremely tired. Is that what happens when you sleep too much?
It's not if you sleep too much, but if you sleep too much and do nothing.
Yeah,
Which I think
like wicked tired.
Yeah, you gotta like go running or something.
I tried that. It's too cold. My lungs burn.
It's like 55 degrees out.
Ugh, exercise. Yeah, but it isn't in the morning time when I'd actually go. See, here's my problem. I can't just go for a run. Like, I have to go for a run and then follow it up with a shower. Because if I go for a run and then I don't shower, then I'm just gross.
Oh.
It's like a pet peeve.
Then do it at like night then. When it's like still barely light out.
Still have to take a shower.
Yeah, but it's better than.
But then
like,
it's cold. It's still cold. It doesn't matter. It's either morning or night. It's still freaking cold.
Oh, okay.
Why does it have to be?
I'm just trying to help the problems here.
Yeah. All right. So the quick question to start the show is: when is it too early to draft? Because we do lotteries. We do a lottery system in our league, and we usually do the lottery like, what is it, June, July, sometime during the NBA Finals.
June usually. It's early June, actually.
That preps us for the draft. I remember back in the day, I used to draft way too early in our league. So when is too early?
I think too early is in July. If it's in July, it's too early. I think the best time to do it is late August, so like the 3rd or 4th preseason game. But if you at least like we've done it before.
Yeah.
In August, and it was okay. I think if you wait till August, it's fine. But to get the best one, it's late August. But if it's in July, it's just too early because you're gonna get injuries. You're gonna get preseason stuff. You don't know who's winning quarterback battles, running back battles. I'd say the best time to do it is late August.
Yeah. So in our league, we basically drafted 1 year because this is the early on in the early years. We were so lit about drafting.
It was like late July.
Yeah,
right?
that we drafted in like late July, right before the preseason started. And I drafted like Julian Edelman and Devontae Adams, and like I thought I had this stacked team, and everyone got hurt in the preseason. And I was like, this sucks. So I would say like any time in July is too early.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, the earliest time I would probably go is after week 2 of the preseason. But after week 3 of the preseason, you know that all of the starters are basically done. Like, they're not going to play. So anybody that's important to your team will not play in week 4 unless they're coming off an injury and need some playing time. Usually the backups go in and play that first week.
I'd say,
that last week of the preseason. So what I would say is after week 3 is over, when you're in week 4, that's the perfect time to draft. Or the weekend before the NFL season starts. The other part of it too is it's not even just like drafting at the right time so your guys don't get hurt, but it's nice to be able to, you prepare for the draft, you spend a long time doing it. Yeah, you want to draft, but if you wait, one of the problems that I found drafting really early, even at the beginning of August, is that you run into this situation where you have to wait and wait and wait and wait before the season actually begins with a team that you drafted, and you want to see if it is actually good. And there's less waiting time when you draft like a week before the season. So it allows you to draft and then jump right into starting to prepare for week 1 and maybe make some trades or do whatever, as opposed to having a full month of just waiting for the season to start after you drafted and then crossing your fingers and hoping guys don't get hurt.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah. So I was going to say, when is it too early, or not when is it too early, but what system do you use would you prefer to use to organize draft order? So many people use several things. I know we both would have answered, we probably both would have answered with the lottery draft system because that's what we use.
Yeah.
But people do it several different ways. They do it by standings. They do it by...
Standings isn't awful. But then sometimes if you don't want the first overall pick,
right?
Which is the way we kind of do it, why it's kind of don't we do it everyone has the same odds, or is it the it's
the person with the top to bottom, the person with the worst record from the previous year has the best shot at a high record
to prevent tanking like the NBA.
No, I've thought about it. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, any way you do it, it's not that bad. It's kind of whatever floats your boat.
Right. What I've thought, and I tried to push this for a while, and it kind of fizzled out, but and it's also difficult to get everyone to freaking respond to your freaking text messages. But is to do your draft lottery system as you normally would based on standings like we do, but also try to throw in the option to choose whatever pick you're going to get. So if you lottery out at the first overall pick, right? Instead of just taking that first overall pick, you get to pick the first of all the picks. Or you can use the end of season standings and do that same system where the worst team in the league gets to pick their pick, and then so on and so forth down the line. And then the championship team doesn't get to pick their pick. They just get
they're stuck with whatever.
Right. So that's a system that I've considered, but I find the lottery one far more interesting.
It's more entertaining.
So too early to draft. July. Don't draft in July. Draft late August is the recommendation. Let's move into our quarterback rankings for the 2020 season. We talked about on the previous episode our top 6 quarterbacks, the first 6 quarterbacks that we would be not willing to take because we don't like taking quarterbacks early, but the first 6 guys that you would want to have on your team. To go through, mine were Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, and then a Russell Wilson. And what were yours, Rick?
My top 6 were Josh Allen, number 6, Russell Wilson, 5, 4, Deshaun Watson, 3, Kyler Murray, 2, Mahomes, 1, Lamar.
So you went backwards on me.
I did.
You like
to go
up. So that was our top 6. We discussed that on the previous show. If you're on YouTube, wherever you're listening, just listen to the previous show before you listen to this one. Today we're going to talk about 7 through 12, and then I believe next week we're moving on to wide receivers. Is that right? It's actually running backs, my favorite position. So that should be interesting. But let's start with, I'll talk about these 2 guys that we have on our list at 7 and 8 are interchangeable. And so we'll just talk about both of them kind of at the same time. But I'll start with my number 7 guy is Matt Ryan. And my number 8 guy is Dak Prescott. Enlighten us with your 7 and 8.
My number 7 is Dak, and my number 8 is Matt Ryan.
Okay, so we basically have these two guys reversed, but kind of in the same area. I think if you were to consider, like, we were talking about where we would possibly throw a tier into the top 6 quarterbacks in the last episode, right? And it was kind of like, the top 2. You were like, it's like tier 1, then tier 5. So, but for me, I think if you were to realistically tier it, it would be tier 1, Lamar and Mahomes, and then tier 2 would be the other 4 guys that we mentioned. And then I draw a line and have another tier starting here at 7, 8, 9, and 10. But for me, Matt Ryan and Dak Prescott are very, very close. I told you before, I don't like Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson this year.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm kind of being forced to rank them high, even though I really I don't want them on my team, and I don't even want to rank them high. Dak is always a low-end QB1 almost every year. So I don't think you're going to have a problem with Dak Prescott being a QB1 if you do draft him. I think he'll probably end anywhere between 8 and 12. But Matt Ryan he's been an interesting player to dissect in the last 2 years, because we have noticed a trend with Matt Ryan, and it's that he'll have a bad year and a good year and a bad year and a good year and a bad year. And this year he had a mediocre year. He wasn't a top 5 quarterback. He kind of didn't perform to the level that you would want from him.
On the bad end.
He wasn't bad. He just wasn't good in terms of fantasy. So for me, I put Matt Ryan 7, and I kind of wanted to put him higher, but I just couldn't put him past Russell Wilson. So I had to put him at number 7 ahead of Dak Prescott, because I don't like Dak Prescott in 2020. I like Matt Ryan going into this year because of the trends. I think that he has 2 of the best wide receivers in the NFC. I love Calvin Ridley. I have an obsession with Calvin Ridley, so don't judge me. But he has a very good wide receiver core. They just signed Todd Gurley. That offensive line is decent. The only thing they don't have right now is a tight end. And if you have Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, I'm not really concerned about the freaking tight end position. So I think Matt Ryan is good enough. He's a yardage guy. The only thing that is a concern is how many touchdowns he scores. And if the Atlanta Falcons offense is good again and he throws 32 to 35 touchdowns, I think he can finish as a number 6, 7, or maybe 8 quarterback in fantasy. But I think you could see him maybe even finish in the top 5. I don't see him finishing in the top 3. But I see him in that top 5. I think he's going to have a better season than Dak, though.
What I'll say, I think these guys, you can go either way with these guys. The reason I have Dak ahead of Matt Ryan is just for Matt Ryan with me. He lost Austin Hooper, which I know doesn't seem like too big of a deal, but that was his security blanket. And if you look at, you said one of the biggest problems for you is touchdowns. Austin Hooper was the guy in the red zone.
Right.
I feel like
Julio is never the guy in the red zone for the Julio owners who know.
It's not. I feel like Todd Gurley is going to get a lot of looks in the red zone this year. And then also, their offensive line really was not good last year. And they didn't really do it's not one of the worst in the league, but it's not good. They didn't really do anything to improve in the offseason. At least as of right now, they might draft a guy. And then with the Cowboys, they're pretty much the exact same team. They lost Randall Cobb, right?
Yeah.
And he wasn't really that involved in the offense. I mean, he was, but he wasn't like, I don't think he's going to make too much of a difference losing him. So I don't think the Cowboys get much worse, and you add Mike McCarthy as well. I think that's probably a good thing for Dak. So I get what you're saying. I don't really love Dak either for this year. And I think there's a chance he could get overhyped. But I think Dak is a slight edge right now for Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Dak could be continuously good. Like you said, there really is no major changes to that team, besides the fact that they changed coaches, which is huge. And that could throw it over the top. You know what I mean? Because you have seen a guy like you know what I mean, Mike McCarthy run with Aaron Rodgers for a very long time. And I'm not putting
Right.
Dak Prescott in the same arm class as Aaron Rodgers was. But I think that Mike McCarthy can have a positive effect on Dak Prescott. I think what Dak did this year was because there was a lot of, not that quarterbacks had a down year in fantasy, but there just wasn't a lot of really great quarterbacks this year. Like you had Deshaun Watson as the third quarterback, and you felt like you weren't getting great performances on a week-to-week basis. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, it was kind of a weird year for quarterbacks. Whereas the season before, there was like 3, maybe 4 guys that you felt like, okay, we're good here. So it's like, does Dak have the possibility of finishing in the top 3, 4, or 5? I just don't. I don't see it happening. I don't think it can.
I don't think it will either.
He had an easy schedule for the good part of the 2019 season. So he had like maybe 5 hard games the entire year. So I don't know what the schedule looks like this year for Dak, but
he still gets to play in the NFC East, which is not. Right. I don't think that hard.
It just depends. It depends on how much Mike McCarthy intends on throwing the football and running the football and what the split. He's always had Adams and he's always had, Rodgers, but he's never had like a Ezekiel Elliott like running back. So it's like, what is he going to do with Zeke? How much does he anticipate running the football? What were the splits when he was in Dallas? You know what I mean? I think we talked about that on the coaches show. I think it was like 45-55. So he wasn't like too far into the past. But for me, I just don't think I don't think you're going to see much of a huge difference for Dak Prescott. And I think that the thing for him that I'll note this, the thing for Dak is he is a extremely athletic quarterback and has the ability to get out of the pocket. But for some reason, he doesn't. He doesn't like running the football. And so he'll run for like over 250 yards. Like you can book that. But he has the ability to do what, like Kyler Murray can do, which is run it for 500-600 yards, but he just doesn't. He chooses not to. And if he did get that yardage in terms of rushing, 3 touchdowns, 500 yards, he would be in the same class as like a Deshaun Watson in fantasy, right? Because he gets the numbers through the air. He would get the numbers on the ground. That would put him in the top 3, top 4. But he's just too timid. He's not a guy that likes to run it out of the pocket. And Mike McCarthy's systems don't really call for a guy who does that. So we're going to have to see with Dak. I like him and I don't like him. And it's kind of like a emotional relationship.
But, I mean, I think either guy, though,
it's like even. It's like razor thin. So, like I would almost say that they're tier 3, and then you just drop off. I think those 2 are just a tier. Yeah, right. So then 9, 10, 11, and 12 are very different.
Sure.
So I don't know how we're gonna really discuss this, but we'll talk about. So we have our 4 guys are very similar, right? The only guy you have different is Breeze. So
I think I have Breeze. And
we'll talk about Breeze and Tannehill in a different conversation, but let's talk about where we rank these following 3 players. So we'll start off with Matt Stafford. Where do you have Stafford ranked?
I have Stafford number 9.
So I have Wentz number 9, but I have Stafford 10. So tell me why you have Stafford 9.
So for me, what I saw out of Stafford in that Lions offense when everyone was healthy in the first few weeks of the season was just great things from Matthew Stafford. I believe he finished the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. I think he was the number 3 quarterback in fantasy. He's throwing the ball a lot with Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. TJ Hawkinson, you get a second year out of him. They pretty much have the exact same offense. You now have a healthy Kerryon Johnson. I believe they're going to, I don't know if they did boost through the offensive line.
Yeah.
And if they didn't, they still have the draft to do so. And I think their offensive line was pretty fine anyway last year.
Right.
So I am really excited about what the Lions can do with a full season.
Okay.
So that's kind of why I have Stafford higher.
For me, I dropped him 1 position lower, because I believe in one particular player that we'll talk about. Maybe it's blind belief. We'll
I know.
see.
I mean, I think all these guys on my list from
it's all the
even
same.
up to 13 and 14. I don't think there's too big much
a difference. Yeah. So for me, I think when it comes to Stafford, I think all of those things are very true. But the one concern that does come to mind is their offensive line, and it's
Sure.
not a bad offensive line.
It's similar to like Atlanta, where
Right. It's not great. It's mediocre. And I just think Stafford, he seems to have problems with injury, which is very concerning for a guy who doesn't really get out of the pocket. Like, he gets out of the pocket, but he just gets hurt so frequently. And, if you get a full 16 out of Stafford, I think he could finish 8 to 10. But he's just he's not an exciting quarterback for me in terms of what you're going to do. Like, I don't know. He doesn't like a lot of these guys that you have in the top 6, 7, or 8. They have something about them that's exciting. Matt Ryan can throw for 5,000 yards if you want to.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Dak Prescott can kind of run it all over the field, right? And the coach and stuff like that. So, but for Stafford, it's just like, what's to be excited about for him? You know what I mean? He doesn't really rush.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have to. We talked about this before. This is a new league. You know what I mean? This is a new situation. And with these quarterbacks who run all over the field, and it's like Stafford's now sitting here, and even if he has, the 2 wide receivers and the tight end and a good offensive line and the running back, he's going to have to throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns in order to at least compete to the top 5.
Well, if he had 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, I think he'd be a top 3.
Oh yeah, for sure. But he's just not going to get that. So
no, I think he can finish though, like 5 or 6 if he does play like he did last year, which he was on pace for 5,000 yards.
Right.
And he's thrown 5,000 yards before in his career, and even like I think he can throw like 4,500, 4,600 with like 35 touchdowns, which would get him pretty high on this list. It wouldn't get him in the top 5, but maybe 6 or 7.
What round would you take Matthew? Would you be willing to take Matthew Stafford this year, and what round would it be?
I think I would take him, but it would be later in the draft. I don't know what round. I'd have to look, but he would be the quarterback I'd pair with like a younger guy. Probably.
Yeah. That's a fair. I was just about to say that. I said I would take him hopefully a little bit later, like 10th or 11th if he's there. And pair him with a younger quarterback so you have something a little more consistent. My problem with Matt Stafford is that he's going to be one of those quarterbacks that people draft, and then he ends up on your team just sitting either on your bench, or you have to, drop him to the waiver wire because he's not performing consistently enough for you. So I think there's going to be weeks where he's going to be really good, but Stafford to me, I look at personally as a streaming option moving forward. I think he'll finish in the top 10, but I just don't think the consistency is going to be there for him to jump forward. Now, let's talk about Carson Wentz. You have him ranked 11?
12.
12. Okay. Carson Wentz has burned a fair amount of individuals since, his 2017 season?
Since his MVP season.
Yeah, since his MVP season. The season he won MVP, he was playing out of his mind. He was very good. And the Eagles have struggled with a fair amount of things. They don't have wide receivers. They've struggled to run the ball. And Carson Wentz has had trouble staying on the field. That's why Carson Wentz and Matthew Stafford are probably in the same category at this point.
Yeah.
But at least for me. But so for Carson Wentz, I think this year that offensive line is still that offensive line. They have a great offensive line. They have a good running game, and they still have Zach Ertz. So those 3 things are very good for Carson Wentz. The problem is they still don't got a freaking wide receiver.
Yeah, I think this is a guy who could go up on my list definitely. But as of today, as of right now, I have him number 12.
Yeah.
It's just because the Eagles were out on Diggs. They didn't get him. The Eagles have been in on multiple wide receivers, Robbie Anderson, all the free agents out there, and they have not gotten a single guy. They lost Nelson Aguilar, who was not good for them last year, but was still a body, though. They don't have any wide receivers right now. Deshaun Jackson's like 1,000,000 years old coming off a terrible injury.
Yep.
And Alshon Jeffrey's getting old, too, and he wasn't even that great last year.
Yeah, he's been on the trade market.
Their only guys are Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, which are 2 tight ends, which aren't bad. But
there's a young wide receiver that they drafted last year, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who actually showed flashes of being good, but he's...
isn't a top 1 or 2 receiver. I don't think they have a top.
No, they don't.
It reminds me of the Patriots.
But where are they drafting?
That's a good question. I do think if they draft a receiver in the first round, that could definitely help.
Yeah.
But I also see the Eagles. I think they're really excited about Miles Sanders. I think I could easily see them being a team that runs the football a lot.
Yeah.
Uses the play action.
So they picked number 21.
I think he'll be good, but
they picked number 21 in the draft. So there's some first round wide receivers.
Yeah,
they can get a decent
good
guy.
receiver.
I think that there are still options out there. I think there are receivers that are on the trade market. There are guys that they can figure out. I think they're really just one receiver away from being there, but I don't really think Carson Wentz needs that receiver to have success.
See, I think he does to be a top fantasy option.
Yeah, top 3 or 4 guy. Yeah, I agree. If he's a top 3 or 4 guy, he's got to have the receiver. But for me, I'm like, if you're talking about 8, 9, or 10, like I would take him over Stafford, Tannehill, Rodgers, and Breeze, just because of the pure fact that like I like Stafford, but he hasn't really shown a full like.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time since he's been a top quarterback, and we don't know what we're gonna get from Tannehill, and Rodgers is in the bottom of the bucket. He's done. Like so for me, and Breeze is also in the same conversation, 40 years old. So it's like to me, Carson Wentz kind of has to be 9. But it could swap between Stafford and Wentz. It honestly could.
Yeah.
So it's not really a huge situation for me, but I have him 9. So my 7, 8, and 9 are Ryan, Prescott, Wentz, and then I have number 10, Stafford. You had where did you have Wentz again? I'm sorry, you missed that.
I have Wentz 12. I have Breeze and Rodgers and Stafford have him.
Okay, so let's talk about Ryan Tannehill, and then we'll finish our conversation on Aaron Rodgers versus Drew Brees entering into that top 12.
Sure.
So where do you have Tannehill?
Oh, I do not have him in the top 12.
Oh, that's true. Hold on a second. We'll talk about Tannehill and Brees. Let's talk about Rodgers. Forgive me. I was talking about the wrong guy. Rodgers, where do you have him ranked?
Rodgers, I have 10.
Okay. Why?
He's moving down on this list. I think Wentz has a chance to surpass him for me if they add a receiver or 2. But yeah, Rodgers, he's number 10 on this list. As of right now, though, I think he's still a guy that you could draft late and I think would do okay. He's getting older. Honestly, the team I think is moving in a direction of running the football and playing defense.
Yeah.
They don't really have many weapons. I mean, Devontae Adams missed half the season last year, which I think will help Aaron Rodgers if he plays a full season.
Right.
And people will forget that, but they haven't really. They didn't do anything to add really that second receiver spot. Now they could draft somebody. Right. They could just play from within, and maybe it works out. They lost Jimmy Graham as well. I don't know. I think it's Rodgers is 37 now.
I know. Here's where. I'm gonna throw this. I'm gonna lay this on you. I know it's late March, but here's the ADP for Aaron Rodgers right now: 604.
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
So this is why I have Rodgers at 12, because I won't take him until he's the 12th guy left on my board. Like if I'm sitting there and all the guys that I have ahead of him are gone, then I'm willing to take Rodgers. And when we're talking about that, that's like the 10th round. So Rodgers ain't going in the 10th round. And the reason why I ranked him so low is because I don't want him on my team. Like, and I thought I'd never say that about Aaron Rodgers. Last year going into the season, I was like, ooh, you might be able to get Rodgers on the cheap. He could have a really good season this year. But after the season, he just was so bad.
Yeah.
And it was like, what are we actually going to do here with Aaron Rodgers? So for me, I think the old age has hit him. He's entered into a new phase of his NFL career. This honestly could be his last year. He's not cut from the same cloth as Breeze and Brady.
Really?
Yeah. So? This could be Rodgers' last year.
Well, he's still good.
He's still very good. I'm not talking about him sucking. I'm just saying from the things I've been seeing and hearing from Rodgers the last year, it sounds like he's not really interested in playing beyond the next 2 seasons. So he could be done after this year, but the hope of looking at Rodgers, holding on to him and saying, "Ooh, I'm gonna get that Rodgers like quarterback play that I got 3 or 4 years ago," and drafting him in the 6th round and expecting it is just asinine to me. So I put him at 12 because I honestly think he'll probably finish between 12 and 15. So I put him at the high end of it. I kind of wanted to put him lower, but I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, they did add Devin Funchess. I saw, so whoop-de-doo.
Oh, God.
But
Devin Funchess on his 4th team in a row.
I mean, Rodgers last year, I think he threw 26 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So if they do want to, like, he didn't throw the ball all that much. Like, with Devontae Adams coming back for a full season, and if the team wants to, he can throw more touchdowns and more yards. I mean, it's very possible. But no, I overall agree with what you're saying. I think the day of Rodgers being a top 3 fantasy quarterback, I think, is over.
Yeah.
He's still very good NFL quarterback.
He could punch himself into the top 10, but what is the highest ceiling for Rodgers for you?
For me, I think it's like 7th.
Yeah.
I think he can get
that's
like
not
7th.
too far. I would say probably 9th. I'm a little bit further down on him than you are, but I just think, like I said, he's another one of those quarterbacks that's not with the trend. He does run it a little bit.
He runs it more than like Breeze or Brady.
Right, but he's just not with that trend. Do you see Rodgers this year throwing 5,000 yards and 35 touchdowns or 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns, which would give him a top 6, maybe 5 finish? I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see it for Rodgers. And I think you can make the argument, oh, he didn't have Devontae Adams last year. And I'm like, does it really matter?
I think that matters a little bit. But I don't know if that's enough to put it over.
Because even when he was back, he had some weeks where I think he had 2 weeks where he was like a QB1. Not QB1 as in like a top 12 quarterback, but like QB1 as like the number 1 quarterback in fantasy.
I think both those weeks he had Adams though.
Yeah. So I mean, we're gonna have to see with Rodgers. I just think the older he gets,
he is injury prone as well. He's had almost every other season he gets an injury.
So I put Rodgers a little further down on this list for some younger guys. You know what I mean? At this point, I kind of rank Rodgers, Breeze, Brady all in the same area, just because I think they're top 15 quarterbacks in fantasy next year, but I don't see them finishing anywhere close to the top 10. You know what I mean? Or that's a little hyperbolic, but you know, I just don't see him finishing in the top 10 this year. So I have Rodgers 12. You have Rodgers 10. So let's talk about the debate here to conclude the show. Ryan Tannehill versus Drew Brees.
Sure.
So I just told you, Brees is 13 on my list. I'll tell you that now. Okay. So Brees is 13. Like I said, Brees, Brady, Rodgers, all in the same category between 12 and 16. Roethlisberger in the same area, same conversation. So those guys are going to be finishing anywhere under 12.
Well, I have Roethlisberger like 19, but that's a different discussion for a different day.
I was going to say 12 to 20. Those were the old guys go. So, but that's kind of where I put them because I don't think, you know, I'm not going to get into a discussion about Roethlisberger, but I don't think he's going to finish maybe even in the top 20. But anyway.
Yeah.
So for me, I want to go with the younger guy here, which is Ryan Tannehill. And I think a lot of people are extremely down on my man's Ryan Tannehill. And I wanted to rank him higher. I might actually, as the season moves closer, I might move him ahead of Stafford, which is a jump up. I could even move him ahead of Wentz.
I think it's because your hate for Derrick Henry and you have to like some Titans players, so you put all the hatred towards the love of Ryan Tannehill.
It's true. To change my mind. Now, this is what I like about Ryan Tannehill, which is why I would move him up my board a little bit. I probably won't move him past Dak. Yeah, I probably won't move him past Dak, but I could justifiably see him on my list at 10. He's going in the 13th round right now.
Yeah.
So if you don't remember, now I had Dak and Tannehill last year. And Dak was my quarterback for about, how many weeks did I play? 15, 14? I don't know. But Dak was my quarterback for like 12 of them. And Ryan Tannehill was my quarterback for 2. And so I think For me, when you look at Tannehill's numbers from the second he started one game for the Tennessee Titans, they said we're done with Marcus Mariota. We're going to Ryan Tannehill. When they moved on to Ryan Tannehill, he was a QB1. He was actually a top 3 or 4 quarterback in fantasy football when given the opportunity to start. Now, we don't know if that's going to translate to next year. I don't think anybody feels comfortable saying that he's going to be a top 5 quarterback next year. If I felt comfortable with that, I would have had Ryan Tannehill 5 on my list. I'm not comfortable even ranking him at 9, which is why he's at 11 here. But if he does go out next year and perform like the quarterback he did last year, you're getting a steal in the 13th round. And for me, he's a guy I'm drafting. Like I would rather have Tannehill over the old men Rodgers, Brees, and Brady, just because of his youth and the fact that he does actually like to run it all over the field. I think he averages like 4 rushes a game, which is not, compared to a guy like Lamar Jackson, is nothing. But for a quarterback in the NFL, rushing it 4 times a game, you usually get 7 to 10 yards per rush. You're talking about 25 to 30, maybe 40 yards rushing in a game, which is 4 fantasy points. So that could turn a 16 fantasy point week for a quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo into a 20 fantasy point week easily.
So what I'll say about Tannehill, I do like his weapons, and I think he did have a good little run last year, which is the only reason he's in this discussion, I think.
Right.
But for me, like Tannehill, I think the Titans know, and even when Tannehill was on the run, they know their offenses ran around Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
He is their offense. Right. And if we look at Ryan Tannehill's run last year, it really wasn't as good as I think some people think. Like, he had about a 3 or 4 game stretch where he lit it up. But if you remember, those 3 or 4 games were against the worst defenses in the league, pretty much. Yeah. It was like Houston, Oakland. It was all defenses that ranked in like the bottom 5 or 6 of defenses against quarterbacks. And in the playoffs last year, he wasn't bad. He was good enough for them to win games, which I think he's going to be this year. I think he'll be good enough.
They just didn't use him.
Games. Yeah, correct. But like he only threw for 300. I believe I'll have the exact number in a second. 369 yards in 3 games. In 3 playoffs.
In the playoffs. Like, I think that is why people are fading him at this point. You make some valid points about easiness of schedule, but he was always a QB1, and I think that's like it wasn't like he was the thing about Tannehill that a lot of people aren't going to really understand is that the reason why he was that high in terms of that 7-8 game stretch where he was the starter, where he was finished like the number 3 quarterback or the number 4 quarterback over that 8 game span. The reason why he was at the top of that list was because of his consistency. He consistently got 20 plus fantasy points a game, which is what you're looking for from your quarterback, as opposed to a guy like you had, Deshaun Watson last year, who would go off and have 35 points in a game and then have 8 and 7.
It was disgusting.
Yeah, right. So it's like consistency at the quarterback position is not an easy thing to find. And when you have a guy like Tannehill, I think he was consistently getting 20 points a game only because of the rushing, because there were some games where he probably shouldn't have ascended into that point. But I think for me, I'm not going to rank Tannehill up in the 10s, into the top 10 just because of the things that you said. Like, I'm not really sure yet on what I think of him. He's got a good offensive line, got a good running game. They got some good wide receivers. I don't know who they got at tight end, but they got some good offensive pieces there that they can work with. And I think the coaching is good. So I think all of that put together could mean good things for Ryan Tannehill. It's just it remains to be seen if he can stay consistent. Now, can you tell me why you have Brees over Ryan Tannehill?
Yeah, I think I generally agree with you with having the younger guy over the older guy.
Yeah.
But Brees, like, he played very, very well when he came back last year.
Yeah.
And they added Emmanuel Sanders. Like, that offense, if you look at that offense, the team around Drew Brees is unreal. Yeah. Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Jared Cook, Emmanuel Sanders, like they have weapons on that team. And I just think playing in the Dome, playing against probably weaker teams in the NFC South, or not necessarily weaker teams, but weaker defenses like Atlanta, Carolina now, who lost Luke Kuechly. Tampa Bay's got a good team, but their defense is probably their weakest point. I like Drew Brees. I really do. I wouldn't draft him early, and he's still like the older guy, but out of all of the old guys, Drew Brees is definitely my favorite.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason why I have him ahead of Tannehill, but it's not too big of a difference.
Right. I just like the upside on Tannehill, and for my rankings, for my quarterback rankings, I'm always going to take youth and upside over old man play. Like if I could see Breeze playing consistently every single week, getting 20 plus fantasy points a game, then I would totally be okay with taking him. But the older he gets, the more it becomes scary for me to take a guy like Drew
I know.
Brees.
I'm the same way with that, but I was really down on him last year and he proved me wrong, and the team got better around him.
Yeah.
So I have no choice.
So there is your top 12 quarterbacks in fantasy. Do you have any concluding thoughts about our top 12?
No, I think if you get any one of these guys late in the draft, especially if you pair Breeze and Tannehill, for example, I think you'll be fine with those two as your quarterback.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go out of your way and take Mahomes in the first round.
Yeah, don't go.
Or Lamar. Lamar's going in the first round.
The real guys,
every draft.
The real guys that I'm looking at late in the draft are actually after 12, which is kind of funny.
Me too.
The strategy that Rick usually takes, which is not a bad one, of drafting a more proven quarterback, more established quarterback, and then going after the riskier play. It's not a bad move, but in the day and age of streaming, you don't have to do it. You can draft that young quarterback and then just cross your fingers and hope he's good.
Right.
So, anyway, that'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Don't forget to check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Have a good week. We'll talk about running backs next week, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday, Fantasy Champs.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at @TheFFChamps.